Certain parts of the year are hard to prepare for. And it's interesting because every year when we sit down on the floor at Tisha B'Av, I always have a thought that, we prepared, didn't we? We had the 3 weeks, we had the 9 days. We spoke about the lack of Beis Hamikdash. We spoke about being better. And yet, when we get back to this moment, the moment before Kinnus, it's always that same feeling of we're here again. What could we share? What could we do? How could we try to be a little bit better? There's a line that every time I open my notes each year on Tisha B'Av that I see, I always feel bad repeating the same line, but it's an incredible line from the Sfas Emes. We open up Kinnus every year with the following Sfas Emes and the Chafetz Chaim. And the Sfas Emes, about 160 years ago, wrote, Mashiach is coming very soon because the world can't get to any bit of a lower place. Heilige Ger Rebbe, 160 years ago, looked around at the decrepit society and said, there's no way this could go on. And every year when I see these words and I think about it, what would the Sfas Emes say today? What would he have said 20 years ago? What if he had said 10 years ago? What would he have said when we're sitting here today? And this is followed with the words of the Chafetz Chaim that he says, if you look at the Torah writes different calculations regarding different halachas, and he goes until the year 2087. And the Chafetz Chaim, in commenting on what are we going to do after the year 2087, he says, don't worry, Mashiach is going to come many years beforehand. 2087 no longer seems that far off. Looking at 60 years from now, and the Chafetz Chaim many years ago wrote, don't worry, you don't need to know the calculations. Mashiach is going to come many years prior. And we all know that we're all told that yes, Mashiach is indeed at the door, but there has to come a point, we're taught, that if it's not going to come based on our zchusim, it's going to come just because Hashem has enough. And the Sfas Emes is teaching us that he felt society was at that point. So what do we feel? And the problem really is that we don't feel. And last night during Eicha, I remembered that there was one year that I wasn't in a shul for Eicha. I wasn't in a camp for Eicha. There was one year that I leaned Eicha myself in a hospital room. And when I was thinking about it last night during Eicha, I realized that at the time, it wasn't so scary. I had some sort of growth on my face. No one really knew what it was. They thought it was dental. They thought it was this. And they sent me for IV for 48 hours. I was, I think, 17 or 18 at the time. IV for 48 hours. Okay, I felt fine. So I checked into the hospital. My brother stayed with me. And I got IV. And that was it. Nothing else. Just IV. I was there for Tisha B'Av. So I leaned, said Eicha to the best of my ability. At the time, it wasn't scary because I didn't realize that I was indeed very sick. Only afterwards, when I was leaving, a whole team came in to take pictures and things like that. When I was discharged, my doctor said to me, they only come taking all these pictures when there's something very strange going on. He said you contracted a very rare disease. It was a disease that is extinct. It's called the bubonic plague, the Black Death. Why, how, no one really knows what happened. But we have the medication, they treated it. You're in a situation and you're not scared because you don't realize the severity of it. You don't realize even what's going on. And what I was thinking last night during Eicha was, we're all in a situation we just don't realize the severity of it. If we were to realize what's really going on in the world, if we were to actually internalize the events going on around us, if we actually felt that, yes, indeed, Mashiach might be at the doorstep, and yes, there's something called Goy Gumagog, and yes, there's something called we have to do tshuva, we wouldn't walk around just living happy, carefree lives. But sometimes the fact that we don't know is the reason why we could sit here and not really feel anything. But the Heilige B'nai Yissaschar comes along and he teaches us that even though in generations past they sat and they cried and they fasted, but he says that our avodah of sitting when we don't feel, our avodah of trying when we have no clue what we're doing, when we don't really connect to the words of the Kinnus, when we don't really know what we're saying, but we just want to want, says the B'nai Yissaschar, that's worth that much more. And he actually says that Moshe Rabbeinu looked, Lasid Lavai looked into the Ikvus of the Mashiach. And what it means, he was Anami Kol Adam, is that he realized that he was low in comparison to people that serve Hashem without any feeling. And we could realize this when we see sometimes elderly people, we see sometimes Gedolim and Chachamim, and we hear the way that they speak of Beis HaMikdash, we hear the way that they speak of world events. I grew up listening to Rabbi Rafman Zatzal. Every time there was an attack in Yerushalayim, every bus bombing, he would give a shmooze and he would give a krechs, and we would sit there like almost make fun of the fact that, okay, almost make fun of the fact that he was physically moved by each and every event. But that's real. And we're just so far, we just don't feel it at all. But when we sit down and we want to try, and we sit down and we know that the purpose of Tisha B'Av is to try to connect. The purpose of Tisha B'Av is to try to find that place within us that we realize that we need something more in our life. That's worth that much more. And as we spoke last night, when we sit on the floor, it's really going into a world of ourselves. There's no one next to us. There's no one else that exists. If you've ever been at a levaya, no one at a levaya, if it's a relative and they start crying, no one looks to his right and to his left and tries to pretend like they're not crying and wipe away the tears. Why? Because everyone knows that a levaya is sad. Everyone knows that death is painful, and no one tries to pretend. When we walk into a world of Kinnus, we walk into a world that there's indeed no one around us. And there's indeed no problem with being a little bit real. And in truth, we might have a problem being real externally. We might have a problem physically conjuring up wet tears. It's true. It's something that's very difficult for all of us. But internally, indeed, all of us could find a place that's crying. This is a theme that we've seen throughout, that we might walk around looking like carefree, we might walk around looking like Mr. Tough Guy. I've said this many times. But when we sit down and we talk real, and people have questions, and people want to grow, that's their neshama ablaze inside of them. So it's true, we might have a problem showing physical signs of mourning. We might have a problem actually getting out a wet tear. That doesn't mean we can't try to connect, and we can't try to realize that inside of us, we're really crying. And what is that inside of us that's really crying? Last night, we sat and we sang and we sang and we sang. And when you're singing, sometimes you might wonder, what am I doing exactly? And you might wonder that you might feel something, but you don't know what it is. And I want to explain two different things that could happen at that moment. Shimshon Pincus says that when one wants to work in tefillah, and he has a hard time having kavanah, and he has a hard time focusing, he says, choose a maimer chazal and repeat it again and again and again until the point that it goes into your lathe and into your neshama. When you sit and you sing, and you're singing words of Tehillim, and you're singing words of yearning and longing, and you're singing words that you might not even know what the words mean, but the words that were written by the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, words that were written by David HaMelech, words from Gemara, words from Midrashim. When you sing them again and again and again and again, what happens is, to quote Rav Shimshon Pincus, it's going deep into your neshama and it's lighting your neshama on fire. And he says that's actually a way to connect to tefillah by trying, because then you're in a more real place. So when you sit in such a moment, you wonder, what am I feeling? What is that real feeling? You know what it is? You're feeling your neshama. You're feeling your soul. You're feeling that piece of godliness that's inside each and every one of us. You're feeling that peace that came from all the way up under the Kisei HaKavod. You're feeling something that we work on all day. What do we do when we daven? What do we do when we learn? What do we do when we try to be nicer? What do we do when we try to be realer? What do we do when we have a nisayon and we push through? And then we have the nisayon again and we don't push through. And then we fall down and we feel pathetic and we feel like we can't do anything. But then the next day we get up and we say, you know what, I'm going to try again. What are we doing? We're connecting that piece of God. We're lighting that neshama on fire. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing on this world, which is coming down and serving Hashem. So we sit on the floor on Tisha B'Av and we go into a world that there's no one around us. We go into a world of a little bit more real. It's a world of our neshama. It's a world that we have the ability to connect and be a little bit more real. The Skver Rebbe famously went through Nazi Germany, and there's a picture, a very famous picture of the Skver Rebbe standing, beaten, covered in blood, with a handkerchief on his head. And you might see the picture, you might wonder, it's a strange picture. What exactly was going on? What happened is the Nazis came and went to house, beating, shooting, killing, and of course, when they found a rebel, when they found someone with a beard, that was the one they wanted to kill and beat the most. They didn't just want to kill this guy. That's no fun. They took this Rebbe and they dragged him through the town to the center of town, dragged him by his beard, dragged him by his payas, and started beating him and beating him and beating him, smashing him over the head with the rifle, and his blood pouring down his face as he keels over to the ground. And as he keels over to the ground with blood coming off the wounds of his head, his yarmulke falls off his head onto the ground. And the Nazis realized that the Rebbe was trying to reach out. He was trying to grab the yarmulke, and they kicked the yarmulke away. And the Rebbe, and they kick him, and they're punching him, and he has no strength, and he's about to literally keel over, and they see him reaching into his pocket. They see him reaching into his pocket. What's he pulling out of his pocket? And he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a handkerchief, and he pulls out a white handkerchief, and he slowly, and he pushes it up onto his head. And that, the Nazis thought, was the funniest, most humorous, pathetic thing of all. And with him, with his handkerchief on his head and blood dripping down his face, the Nazis picked him up and they took a picture of the Skver Rebbe. That's a picture we have until today. We're not beaten physically. There's no blood falling off of our head. But we have the same level of difficulty, and maybe even more sometimes, to connect and to put on the yarmulke and to be real and to live like we're supposed to be living as Yidden. And Tisha B'Av is that day, is a day that we could connect and we could be a little bit more real and a little bit bigger. And many have remarked that going through Kinnus and taking time, and even last night, and sitting and singing and connecting those who've tried and those that dug a little bit deeper into their neshama, many have remarked that they left Tisha B'Av actually enjoying it at some level. And they actually, the next year, looked forward at some level to a Kinnus, to an Eicha. Because when your neshama is on fire, when you're looking inward, when you're building yourself up from the inside, there's a feeling that you can't really explain. It's a feeling of realness. It's a feeling of connection. It's a feeling of we're doing what we're supposed to be doing on this world. So I hope throughout Kinnus this morning, I hope it already started last night. Everyone has different moments that talk to them. Maybe it's a story, maybe it's reading a word in an English Kinnus, or maybe it's just sitting there for a moment with your head held down and thinking about life for a minute, and thinking about what's going on in the world, thinking about the tsarais, thinking about personal challenges, thinking about personal issues, and trying to make that insurmountable decision of being a little bit better and a little bit bigger and a little bit realer. And as we quoted last night from Yisrael Salanter, that's indeed really what Tisha B'Av is all about. Because Tisha B'Av is about growing. It's about growth. Because a world without Beis HaMikdash, a world without Hashem having His home, is a world of confusion. And I think that confusion, if we were to sum up the tens of hours that we've spent in this room asking questions, looking for answers, I think it could be summed up with one word. It's called confusion. It's that we're confused, we're conflicted, we want to be good, we want to do what's right, but it's just so difficult. And even when we do what's right, we feel like there's more rules and more challenges, and we feel like the nisyones, the temptations around us are just so large. We feel like how could I go back to a world and deal with all those issues? And some have even remarked that a world that we're sitting in, a little bubble without technology, the nisyones just drop infinitely. There's just that challenge is removed. You don't have that daily challenge that one has, the daily nisayon that's pulling so strong. And we want to be good and we want to be holy and we want to be connected and we want to learn and we want to daven and we want to be real Avdei Hashem, but the nisyonos are so difficult. And then when we try to be better, and then we have rules and regulations, and then we have questions in our yeshivas, and we have questions around limudim, and we have questions in our friends. And that's all one thing, it's confusion. Where does confusion come from? Confusion comes from one place. It comes from a world in which the Shekhinah doesn't have its home. If you want to know the one thing that's going to change when there's a Beis HaMikdash, there's going to be many things. There's going to be many things. There's going to be karbanos, as we'll talk about. There's going to be simcha, but it's all going to come from one place. There's going to be no more confusion. Just think about it. Think about all the challenges that you go through on a daily, on a weekly basis. And it could be what one might even coin silly challenges. There's no such thing. You're right, maybe it's not death, and maybe it's not illness, and maybe it's not lack of parnasa, and maybe it's not no job, and maybe it's not a challenge that the world at large would hang on a billboard and an initiative might not be created to solve. But it's the greatest challenge of all. It's the challenge of being a true Eved Hashem, a true Ben Torah, a true Kadosh, a true holy Jew that we all want to be. And why is the challenge so difficult? It's so difficult because of all the confusion. We're confused. We just don't know what to do. We just don't know where to turn. We just don't know what's right. We just don't know what's wrong. And even when we think we know what's right, and even when we finally and we discuss it and we realize it's true, I have to do that. I have to live that way. That's the right way to live. Then what happens? Then another nisayon comes, and another lack of clarity, and another question, and all of a sudden the questions come back into our minds. When the square Rebbe was on the floor with blood dripping down his face, there was no confusion by the Rebbe. There was no confusion that what he needed to do is he needed to put a yarmulke on his head. In Nazi Germany, there was no confusion. It was difficult, it was painful, and we chas v'shalom can't judge, and we're not belittling. But maybe when we wonder if we would survive, the answer is our challenges in a ways could be even stronger because of the confusion, the complete and utter lack of clarity. What are we supposed to be doing? How are we supposed to be doing? How can we get through it? And we look this way and we see this and we hear that and we just don't know what to do. And confusion, sfekus, is really what Amalek is. And it's the most challenging challenge of all. So we sit on Tisha B'Av and you want to know and you want to close your eyes And when you want to conjure up what is that Beis Hamikdash that's going to come down in fire? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to me? As the Bnei Yissaschar says, that our avodah is worth more than anyone else. As the Sfas Emes is promising us that we're getting so close. The Chavetz Chaim didn't want to even make calculations because it's mamish at the doorstep. And it's true, we don't feel it, and we don't even realize how sick we are. We don't even realize what's going on in our brains. The amount of filth, unfortunately, the amount of confusion that every single one of our minds, our brains, our neshamas have been unfortunately infected with are infections that no one ever heard of 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago. And yet, we sit and we try. So what's that Beis Hamikdash going to do? It's going to create clarity. There's going to be clarity what we're supposed to be doing. What is the Avodah? How are we supposed to be doing it? Where should we turn? What should we do? And that is going to bring the greatest simcha of all. So if throughout today you wonder for a moment why we need the Beis Hamikdash, and when we hear different speeches about different Kinnus, and we want to connect a little bit more real, and we want to say, how could we do it? Why do we need it? Don't we live a beautiful life? We have ball, and we have money, and we have wealth, and we have food, and everything is great, isn't it? Then why is depression so high? Why? Why are people crying so much? Why is every therapist's office jammed that you can't get an appointment? Why? Why is it so difficult? Because the confusion is so great. The confusion, the lack of clarity. And that is why we all need the Beis Hamikdash. And that is why, hopefully, just hopefully, every year we sit and we try. And every year we say that maybe this will be the year. As the Bnei Yissaschar says, our avodah is worth more than everyone else. So if every person makes that commitment that they're going to push a little bit deeper, then indeed maybe this will be the year. Yes, Mashiach is at the doorstep, and maybe we'll make that decision that we need the Beis Hamikdash. And once you make that decision, once you know that you need clarity in your life, you can't live that inner turmoil anymore. You can't live that double life, the life trying to be good on the outside, yet feeling so filthy and icky on the inside. You can't do it anymore. I need the Beis Hamikdash. I need cleanliness. I need lack of sfekas. I need to be clear. What am I supposed to do? Once you make that decision, then everything else falls in order. Then you want to know how to be better. You want to know what to be better. You want to know how to be a drop bigger. Then the avodah will be that much easier.